I think it's terribly dangerous for an artist to fulfill other people's expectations. I think they generally produce their worst work when they do that. And the other thing I would say is that if you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting.
What's happening, everybody? Trey here, and today at Reactions to the Classics, we are going to be talking about one of the greatest legends in music history. I'm talking David Bowie, Aladdin Sane, Ziggy Stardust, whatever you want to call him. He is the ultimate musical chameleon, and I listened to all of his 26 studio albums in the past couple of weeks. I was familiar with the first half of his catalog and not familiar at all with pretty much anything in the latter half of his career. So this was really fun exercise to go through and listen to all of his records again. In this video, I will be sharing 10 things I learned from going through all of the legend's work right here. But before we get into that, man, let's give a little perspective on the man himself, David Bowie. Bowie's career spans over 50 years, and he has sold over 100 million records worldwide. Not bad, if I do say so myself. But let's take it all the way back to 1947 when he was born and his childhood, because at the age of 10, he was already showing interest in music and dancing. I had some influences like Elvis, Fats Domino, and Little Richard, who he was quite fond of. He picked up instruments like the saxophone, the piano, and even the ukulele as a child, and already started expressing interest in wanting to be a pop star. He formed a couple of bands in his teen years that, really didn't do much of anything per se, but it got him on that road, and it really sparked that idea by the time he was 16 that he wanted to be a pop star, and he even told his mom as much. His first single, Liza Jane, was released to little buzz in 1964, and he joined a couple of other bands through 1967 while trying to release his first successful hit. His debut album failed to chart, and it was looking a little bit bleak here for Bowie, and I think that is an interesting note, is that, the first few years of his career, he didn't really see much success, but he kept at it, and we are all the better for it. He used his much perceived failure as a point to fuel his first hit, of course, Space Oddity, which was released 5 days before Apollo 11 launch. Definitely, I think, helped propel that song up on top of being just a legendary classic tune. Ushering into the 70s, Bowie crafted his band, which included longtime collaborators Tony Visconti on bass and the great Mick Ronson on guitar, releasing The Man Who Sold the World and the fabulous album, the first Bowie record I ever heard, Hunky Dory. During this time, he came up with arguably his most popular persona, of course, Ziggy Stardust. I think for most people today that are in my age range, that's the album and that's the image of Bowie that probably pops up more than anything. He started to increase in popularity in the UK after debuting the persona. The rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars was a success on both sides of the pond. He also took his hand in producing classics like Transformer by Lou Reed. He was a huge Velvet Underground fan and even covered many of their tracks throughout this period as well. And of course, Raw Power with Iggy Pop, who he would later move to Berlin with. Aladdin Sane was his first UK #1 album in '73, which helped catapult his first records that he released up into the charts, as well as his popularity continued to grow. He set sail and moved to the US in 1974 and had another hit on his hands with the record Diamond Dogs, which reached top 5 on both sides of the pond. In 1975, he had his first #1 in the States with the song Fame. He re-released Space Oddity, and that topped the chart in the UK shortly after. Another Bowie persona, the Thin White Duke, launched into 1976's Station to Station. And then from 76 to 78, we had another watermark moment in Bowie's career as he released the Berlin trilogy. He moved to West Berlin, and these all had good success as well, and continue to see see him experimenting, started collaborating with Brian Eno, the legend there as well, and continued to expand his musical output and palette. The 80s saw Bowie start off with the #1 song Ashes to Ashes as a sequel of sorts to Space Oddity, and the Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, a record that is off of, reached #1 in the UK and segued into his Under Pressure team up with Queen, of course, to secure another #1 hit. Bowie was on fire in the early 80s right here. In 83, he released the song and album Let's Dance, which again went platinum on both sides of the pond, and that could really be argued as his peak commercial success right there, as all the singles also reached the top 20 of the chart. He wrote original songs for the 1986 film Labyrinth. I won't talk a lot about his acting career, but he was quite active in that regard as well. My favorite performance of his is probably as Nikola Tesla in Christopher Nolan's The Prestige from '06. He leaned into the pop rock of the time in 1987 with the album Never Let Me Down. The late 80s and early 90s saw Bowie form the band Tin Machine as well, which released 2 albums to a bit of a lukewarm response, and he decided, hey, it's time for me to go back as a solo star. He came back with the chart-topping Black Tie White Noise in '93 and reunited with Brian Eno for the 1995's Outside concept album. He kept with the musical times by trying his hand at drum and bass in 1997 with the really strong album Earthling, and then the new century saw Bowie keep a steady output while keeping with his standard rigorous touring schedule that he had through much of his career until he stopped performing in 2004 after a heart attack. He then came out with his first album in a decade in 2013 with the record The Next Day, and that debuted at #1 on the UK chart, and then he was voted that same year by the BBC magazine as the best dressed Briton of all time. And I mean, you look at any era of Bowie, he's always looking stylish and dressed to impress, man, dressed to impress. And then of course we had his final record, which was called Black Star, which was released only 2 days before his death, as he was fighting a battle with liver cancer that he kept on the low, didn't really tell too many people about it, and it was designed to be a parting gift of sorts for fans, the Black Star record, and it is one of the most acclaimed records from Bowie, and really of that entire 2010s decade as well. And so that is a quick overview of Bowie. It's tough whenever you have somebody who has such a large output to condense that in there, but I tried my best there, and hope you enjoyed that. So now it is time to go to the 10 things I learned going through Bowie's entire catalog of music. First thing up is that Bowie really is a true musical chameleon, man. He's able to release quality songs in the rock vein, pop vein, even soul, that whole Plastic Soul that he said that the Young Americans record was, folk, especially in his early days. It even touches a bit on psychedelic music on the Space Oddity record from 1969, drum and bass, as I mentioned, on that Earthling record in '97, and obviously tried his hand in electronic music to a good degree as well on the second half of Low. So many great songs in all of these different genres. Most people, it's tough enough just to come up with one quality tune in one specific sound or genre, and Bowie's out here bringing out multiple hits and all different types of styles, which is what makes him one of the greats. Second thing I learned, with such a deep and impressive catalog, he has many albums that could really be considered his best. I think that is a mark of a really talented artist as well. He didn't just peak and have one great record, right? You have a lot of quality albums released in a large span of time. I've heard many people put Ziggy Stardust at the top, or maybe Low, or Station to Station, or even Black Star at the very end. That's a record that some people really hold in high acclaim, as do I. Hunky Dory, I mean, there's so many that you can choose from. I just think that highlights how great of an album artist that Bowie was as well. Next thing I learned is that, man, Bowie, a great musician himself, of course, but he was so smart in arranging and surrounding himself with some fantastic musicians as well. The great Mick Ronson on guitar, has worked with Bowie throughout a lot of his career, most famously in that kind of Ziggy period in the 70s. And man, just a fantastic guitarist right there. Of course, Brian Eno, the great Nile Rodgers. We had Stevie Ray Vaughan, a young Stevie Ray Vaughan that Bowie brought in Carlos Alomar, who I think has appeared on more recordings with Bowie than anyone else. A great guitarist right there. The great Mike Garson on piano, who at one point actually commented on this channel whenever we reviewed Aladdin Sane, which is still one of the coolest moments, I think, on this channel. Of course, Tony Visconti on bass and production, and the great Reeves Gabriels on guitar as well into the 90s and 2000s. Another thing I learned that, you know, his various personas, y'all, from Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke to Aladdin Sane, coupled with that real theatrical live performances that he was able to employ, especially in the 70s, that has stood the test of time. I enjoyed listening to a few live albums of his as well. My favorite, probably the Santa Monica 72 performance whenever he was in the Ziggy persona. But I think that influence really can be seen today. You think of the most popular artist in the world right now, The Weeknd. He's in the midst of a stadium tour where he's bringing out a bunch of different masks and, you know, getting real theatrical, and his presentation. Taylor Swift does much of the same thing. And, you know, I think a lot of that can be traced back, whether they know it or not, to the craftsmanship that Bowie would put into his live performances. Another thing I learned is that Black Star, really one of the more unique listening experiences that you will ever find, since he knew that his end was imminent, right? You often don't have that in music. A couple examples I could think of was Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker, which is great, and one of my favorite hip-hop producers, Jay Dilla, with the record Donuts that he recorded literally in his hospital bed. And I think there's a special nature to that whenever you know your end is near and that you want to put out another project for the world. And man, it's a very heavy, hard-hitting record that just has a special aura, I think, to it as well. And apparently there were even 5 more demos that he recorded around this time too, for another project that we unfortunately didn't get to, you know, see to completion. But man, Black Star, one of the great albums in Bowie's catalog, and it's special the way that it was recorded. And another thing I learned, I think, talking best opener closers of all time, man, Ziggy Stardust gotta be in that discussion, opening with the fantastic track 5 Years and closing with what just might be my favorite Bowie 2, Rock and Roll Suicide. Other contenders for me, because then that got me thinking, what are the better opener and closers of all time in music? Of course, you got to think Let's Go Crazy and Purple Rain from, you know, Purple Rain by Prince. I think Like a Rolling Stone and Desolation Row from Dylan's Highway 61 come together in that Golden Slumbers medley. I'm kind of cheating there for Abbey Road, but you also have something like Speed Trials and Say Yes from Either Or by Elliott Smith, Thunder Road and Jungle Land, of course, by The Boss, and parts of Shine On You Crazy Diamond from Pink Floyd. Again, maybe cheating a little bit there from Wish You Were Here. But man, 5 Years and Rock and Roll Suicide is right in contention with all of those great records, openers and closers, in my opinion. Another thing, just kind of interesting to note, man, Bowie really is the king of album title tracks. You think of it, people: Space Oddity, The Man Who Sold the World, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, Diamond Dogs, Young Americans, Station to Station, Heroes, Black Star, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, Let's Dance. Like, this man knew what to name an album. He just took what was arguably the best song on each record and was like, you know what, let's just name it that. That way the people will remember it right there. And another thing I learned kind of goes into that. He really does have some of the greatest, I think, album covers ever. He appears himself on over 20 of his album covers, and, you know, the images to records like Heroes, Low, Hunky Dory, Space Oddity, and Aladdin Sane are instantly recognizable in just music lore and history. Another thing I learned is that after a lull in creativity and, you know, quality, I'd say in the mid-80s to mid-90s, he had a great resurgence with the records Outside, which is a kind of a wild concept record that Bowie had plans to do even more of. He came out with this one though, and that was one that you know, going through the catalog chronologically, you kind of hit records that maybe don't get talked about as much, maybe aren't as acclaimed, but that Outside record from '95 is great, as is Earthling, which I've talked about a couple times. 2002's Heathen is really great, as is his last 2 records, The Next Day and of course Black Star, which I've already talked about. All these are quality albums that I think are worth the time if maybe you're just more a classic Bowie, you know, late 60s, 70s period, and you haven't checked out some of his later stuff. Maybe go give those a spin and see what you think. And the final thing I learned, we always close out the Legend series with, is this artist overrated, properly rated, or underrated? Well, Bowie is a musical genius. I think most people note that. Most music historians do. And so I'd say he is properly rated. He's definitely not overrated, and it'd be hard to call him underrated with how acclaimed he is, but he really is a mega talent and one of the greatest artists of all time. Now, going into the album rankings right here, I'm not going to go through all of these since there is 26 of them, but my top 10, starting with 1, is going to be The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, and then Station to Station right there at number 2. I just love everything about that album, and the title track just knocks your socks off. One of the great 10-minute songs that you're ever going to hear. Aladdin Sane I have coming in at 3, which, kind of surprised me because I really remembered enjoying the album, just didn't know if it was gonna make that top 3 cut, but I'm putting it just a hair above Hunky Dory, which was my first Bowie album that I listened to maybe at this point 5 years ago, no pun intended. I have Black Star coming in at number 5, just with the title track and Lazarus in particular. I just love the lyricism on there and how vulnerable Bowie is about his imminent death right there. Scary Monsters and Super Creeps is really a fantastic album as well, not just the title track and Ashes to Ashes, but you gotta listen to the whole thing, man. The production that he was doing there really ushered in a great way for him to kick off the 80s. And then I have Low, which rose on this. I kind of thought that album, it just wasn't for me the first time I listened to it, but second time I've enjoyed it quite a bit more. I like the first half, which has more kind of traditional type songs, and then the second half a lot of interesting instrumentals and working with that kind of ambient and electronic vibe right there. And then Let's Dance, Heroes, Diamond Dogs. It's so tough, man, to rank these because all these are fantastic albums. You're like, how is this 9 or 10? And it's just something's got to be there. What are you going to move down? What are you going to move up? I, of course, want to hear your rankings down in the comments. Let me know your top 5, 10, or if you want to rank the entire catalog, go for it too. I will be curious to read that. And then now to the top 10 songs. I'm going no particular order. I got to go Rock and Roll Suicide. I have to go Heroes, of course, one of his more famous tunes, and for a great reason. As soon as you hear those opening notes, you know you're in for an epic right there. Life on Mars, of course. Panic in Detroit, a great cut off of Aladdin Sane. I've always taken a liking to that, as well as Space Oddity, Station to Station, 5 years. Lady Grinning Soul, the closer from Aladdin Sane with Mike Garson's piano, just always touches me, man. I enjoy when Bowie kind of leans into the ballad nature and really lets the strength of his voice shine as well. Rock and Roll with Me and Black Star are closing out my top 10 there as well. And I asked the great people in our Facebook group as well as over here on YouTube to tell me some of theirs. So highlighting some of that, my guy Javier noted that he's always had a soft spot for Starman. Our friend Chris says Sound and Vision could change though, which a lot of people noted. Andrew said Ashes to Ashes. Sean, he's going Life on Mars with Ziggy as his favorite record. David going Aladdin Sane, and favorite song Station to Station. We had a lot of Station to Station. Tom also noted his favorites were Station to Station, the album, and the song as well. My guy Rich said Ziggy Stardust in 5 years, and Mikey noted that he is going in the Low. And over here on YouTube, Brad noted Hunky Dory is going to be his. Ed noted that he's going with Stay as his favorite song, and I thought that Ed had a great point too, just on how Bowie and musicians in general can affect us. He said, Bowie at this point in time is by far my favorite musical artist. Not only do I love almost everything he ever released, but in discovering Bowie, he's the only artist that I can truly say changed my outlook philosophically on life itself, which is something I don't know if I can say about any other artist. Also, the man was truly amazingly intelligent. So every time I watched an interview he's given, I felt like I learned something. No doubt about it, Bowie is a legend. Really well said there, Ed. One more, Paul shows some love to Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. It's his album with Black Country Rock on the song. Joseph's going with Cracked Actors, his favorite song, because that is his theme. He is a cracked actor. We know that here. Christine going with the little 80s Bowie. She likes the Let's Dance album with Let's Dance and Modern Love. Annabelle noting she's giving love to Diamond Dogs with the Sweet Thing Sweet. And Rodney notes that he's probably going with Low, but he also loves Black Star Ziggy and Scary Monsters. It depends on the mood I'm in. That's what's great about Bowie. And my guy Johnny Radio noting his album pick is Ziggy with his song Be in Space Oddity. So thank you to everybody who responded in there as well. And thank you if you gotten to this point in the video. And man, I could have done a video, like a 10-part series on Bowie. I try to keep these videos as concise as possible, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on Bowie down in the comments section below. And check out the other videos in our Legend series as well. Started it up this year, kicked it off with James Brown. We also have Fleetwood Mac, The Clash, and The Cure up in here as well. And if you'd like to support the channel in any way, man, hit that big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like a hand in deciding what next artist is going to be covered in the Legend series, head on over to Patreon right now. That'll be linked below as well as at the end screen, and you can cast your vote for which artist is going to be featured next. We also are running a free trial over there, free 7-day trial. If you want to go and check it out, we have some great people over there. You get early access, voting in polls, help the direction of the channel, can have us do reactions, top 10 list, all that fun stuff for you as well. But I guess, everybody, that'll wrap it up from me today. Long live David Bowie. I hope you have a good one. Happy listening, and until next time, I will see you.